Waterford.
Live from Waterford and Dungarvan, this is Waterford at 1 News.
Good afternoon, I'm Sinead. Aherne. Today's top stories. The owners of meat factories are to take legal action over the blockades outside their businesses. A Waterford councillor believes there's been a marked escalation of organised criminal activity in the city. Irish travellers are facing huge disruption as Ryanair pilots prepare to go on strike. And in sport, it looks like being a busy transfer deadline day for a number of Premier League clubs. The meat industry representative body says more companies will be forced to lay off workers if protests continue outside 20 plants across the country. They added that owners of meat factories have been left with no other option than to take legal action. Beef plan movement farmers are unhappy with what they say are the low prices they're getting for their livestock. 150 workers at Dawn Meats in Granny near Waterford have been told of temporary layoffs, with the trucks carrying cattle being blocked from gaining access to the plants. Agriculture Minister Michael Creed says efforts to reach out to the farmers and begin talks if they suspend their protests have been rejected. Waterford farmer Sean Harris from Beef Plan Movement says while they regret any job losses, their protests continue.
That's regrettable to see that happening, and we don't want to see that happening. But what I would say to you on that, we're 12 days into this protest. And if this is what's happening to the workers in 12 days, just imagine if we're not successful, what's going to happen to workers. If we won't be here, they won't have jobs either. So it's important that we all stand together on this and make sure we do get a result on this.
James Roach is a dairy farmer from South Kilkenny. He's not a member of Beef Plan, but has been protesting at Dawn Meats and Granny since the start.
So I'd like to see my neighbours be able to make a living and survive and feed their families, and like if they plant their farms and move out of the communities, the whole community is going to die, and we've lost our post office, we've lost our creamery, and if we lose more young people out of the country, we won't have any GA features or nothing. Like the whole place will be department. What do we all do? Go up and live in Dublin, like, you know?
A Fianna Fáil councillor believes criminals are obtaining social housing in Waterford City. Eamon Quinlan says there's been a marked escalation of organised criminal activity here. A house and a car were targeted in separate attacks in Dominic's Place in Grantstown this week. Fianna Fáil's Eamon Quinlan told Damien Tiernan on Daisha today that he wants the local authority to crack down on those taking advantage of council resources.
You have people coming in from outside of Waterford, but due to schemes and mechanisms and loopholes, they are actually able to get a Waterford address first, which allows them to apply for things like housing assistance, social housing, housing assistance payments, which allow them then to take permanent properties in more settled areas of Waterford City, quieter areas of Waterford City, and that allows them to engage in a drug trade for quite some time before, I suppose, there's a reaction within the community towards it.
He says there's a lucrative market in Waterford for the criminals. Waterford,
the Gardaí will tell you, is essentially a services market. If you're living in South Kilkenny, if you're living in South Wexford, if you're living in more West Waterford, Waterford City is where you come into to buy, purchase your drugs and then go back to use in smaller villages, smaller towns. Therefore, Waterford is seen as a soft touch, but very much a lucrative touch if they can establish control over it. And it's going to be a moth to a flame in relation to more organised elements to come in.
Irish travellers are facing huge disruption as Ryanair pilots prepare to go on strike. Those based in Britain have already voted for industrial action, with pilots based here expected to do the same tomorrow. Stephen Murphy has more.
It's been a tough few weeks for Ryanair. Last week it announced profits had fallen by 21%, and CEO Michael O'Leary told staff about plans for up to 900 job cuts.
I'm sorry, and I apologise sincerely to all of you for this bad news and any uncertainty it'll cause you over the coming weeks.
This week hasn't been much better for the airline. Yesterday, British-based pilots voted for industrial action, which will take place over 5 days, starting later this month. Ryanair says the decision will cause unnecessary disruption to people's holiday and travel plans. John Spallin is president of the Irish Travel Agents Association and says it'll have an impact on Irish passengers.
That could have a serious impact because of the time of year coming towards the end of the holiday season, and schools are coming back. Passengers will be coming home and someone will be flying out on short weekend breaks just before the school season starts.
Irish-based pilots are also expected to vote in favour of industrial action when the result of a ballot comes back tomorrow. That could lead to thousands of people having their flights cancelled. For anyone counting down to their summer holiday, there could be an uncertain few weeks ahead.
The local authority in Waterford to provide a workshop for councillors about 5G technology. Local campaigners are calling for a moratorium on the development of the new mobile network. Meanwhile, councillors in Clare have passed a motion opposing the rollout of 5G on health grounds. Waterford Independent Councillor Matt Shanahan wants more information.
Could the council clarify the position in Waterford at the moment? I understand there's some preliminary work going on about masting for 5G. I've had a number, I'm sure every other councillor has had too, a number of representations. I certainly don't understand the technology. It does appear that there is some cause for concern, and it would be good to just find out in the future whether there's a workshop or otherwise to be proposed exactly what is the position in relation to this, both legally and environmentally.
Director of Services with the local authority is Kieran Keogh.
As I said, we will. The broadband officer will give a briefing to the members, maybe as a workshop to the next plenary session. Okay.
Over 250 people are now involved in the search for a missing Irish teenager in Malaysia. 15-year-old Nora Quarren, who has special needs, was last seen on Sunday. Today, police are using loudspeakers with a recording of her mother's voice as part of the search. Nora's aunt, Aideen Agnew, is pleading for people not to give up hope.
Nora is still missing and she's very vulnerable, and we need to do everything we can to bring her home.
Annual costs at college-owned accommodation in Waterford have risen by 3% this year as students scramble to find somewhere to live for the coming year. Rents have increased at every campus across the country, some by as much as 11.5%. WIT has accommodation on site at the college campus and on Manor Street. The average cost for a single ensuite room for the year is now €3,950. Derek Delaney is accommodation manager at WIT.
City campus, we've got 360 bedrooms. So the vast majority of those that come into us each year are first-year students. So we like to call it a home away from home. We've got 24/7 security here for them. There's always someone at the desk. We've a shuttle bus that brings them up and down to the college, and we just provide them with all this, say, soft service and that extra little bit of care, I suppose, in their first year. In our own campus accommodation, we have increased this year by just 3%, but this was a pre-planned slight increase that we discussed with the Students' Union before implementing, and all proceeds from our increase are being used to fund the refurbishment of all apartments.
A major UN study suggested a warmer climate means more deserts and potentially less food. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has presented a report claiming 70% of the world's ice-free land is affected by human activity. It says around a quarter of that is being degraded. Delivering the findings, Chairman Ho Sung Lee had one particular focus when calling for action.
Land is where we live. Land is under growing human pressure, and land is part of the solution, but land cannot do it all.
And there's a low-level warning for heavy rain across Munster and Leinster. Up to 40 millimetres could fall in places between 7 this evening and 7 tomorrow morning. Met Éireann forecaster Harm Laukux says it could lead to spot flooding.
It's a yellow warning, so it's lowest level rainfall, so 25 to possibly 40 locally, but more like 25 to 30 in many areas. So it is in a relatively short amount of time, in about 4 to 6 hours it will all fall, so it will lead to some spot flooding.
WLR Sport.
And a very good afternoon, I'm Gavin Whelan. First to soccer, and for the second time this summer a move to the Premier League for Paulo Dybala appears to be off. Juventus are unwilling to let the attacker move to Spurs without first having a replacement. Two players that should be arriving on deadline day, though, are Fulham defender Ryan Sessegnon and Real Betis' Giovanni Lo Celso. Manchester United's Romelu Lukaku was understood to be undergoing a medical at Inter Milan after the clubs agreed an €80 million deal between the two. Arsenal are set to sign two new defenders, with David Luiz and Kieran Tierney arriving at the Emirates Stadium. Former Celtic and Arsenal forward Charlie Nicholas thinks it's a good move for Tierney.
Tierney's improved a lot, especially under Brendan Rodgers, so it would be a better left back than what Arsenal currently have. My honest opinion is it's quite a high price. I think Celtic have got very good value, but what I can say as an Arsenal fan is that Arsenal are signing a very talented left back who will get better.
Former England goalkeeper Scott Carson undergoes a medical at Manchester City ahead of a loan move from Derby. The window closes for Premier League clubs at 5 p.m. this evening. Philip Coutinho, meanwhile, looks set to stay at Barcelona, despite reports being interested from London rivals Arsenal and Spurs. Next to news of rugby, and the Ireland team to face Italy in their opening Rugby World Cup warm-up game is set to be revealed this afternoon. Munster lock John Klein is expected to win his first cap, while Chris Farrell and Gary Ringrose could be paired in midfield in Saturday's match at the Aviva. Back row Jack Conan says all the players know they're competing for places on the plane to Japan for the World Cup.
The standards are so incredibly high, and you've got so many experienced lads in every single position. No one's safe. So it's about just taking these opportunities over the next few weeks and obviously putting your hand up from everything pre-season, making sure you're showing to the coaches how hard you're working, and when it comes to these warm-up games, just applying those things that we've been working on so hard in the last few weeks, and those kind of tweaks to our game that we've made over the course of pre-season, so the coaches see that you're fitting into the structures and you're able to implement game plans.
In Golf Open champion Shane Lowry is just about to tee off his first round at the Northern Trust. Rory McIlroy and Graham McDowell are also part of the field in New Jersey. The tournament is the first of the FedEx playoffs. Meanwhile, Robin Dawson is currently 2 under and tied 21st at the Maiden Denmark competition that's on the European Challenge Tour. Gary Hurley is also in action in the same competition. The Englishman is tied 46th at 4 under. Meanwhile, Waterford's Anna Dawson is continuing her good run of form at the Girls Home International in Scotland. The Tramore golfer is part of the Irish team that beat Scotland 6-3 on the opening day yesterday. Anna Dawson and Kate Lanigan beat their Welsh opponents this morning 3-2. And Waterford's Aina Griffin has been selected on the senior interprovincial team, which is to play in the men's interprovincial championship at Tullamore Golf Club on the weekend of August 30th. And finally, to news of racing, we're rekindling the horse that made Joseph O'Brien the youngest Melbourne Cup winning trainer in history has been retired. The son of High Chaparral has been based in Australia this year, but has only run once since winning the 2017 Cup at Flemington. Rekindling will stand at stud in Europe, according to owner Lloyd Williams. There's a 7-race card meanwhile taking place at Leopardstown later. The first there going to post at 5:15. Sports news brought to you, or that's the latest here on WLR. Our next bulletin is at 2.